John Carmack is one of the most famous, renowned and respected video game programmers in the world, in the industry.
But he's more than that. He's an engineer, he's an innovator.
He didn't have a respect for what you can't do. You know, he made things go very quickly.
He figures out how to solve these, industry-changing things, moves everything forward, stops a project, and then kind of looks around for a bunch of new problems to solve.
He makes stuff up and then tells everybody how he did it.
With Doom and with Wolfenstein, he effectively created a genre, and not only a genre, but in the first-person shooter genre, one of the biggest genres in the world. Games like Call of Duty, Medal of Honor, these massive games could not have existed in some ways without Carmack.
No one really saw it coming. We'd had Wolfenstein, but it hadn't become kind of a household name in the same way that Doom did. Doom became a killer app. It was something that sold PCs. It was something that everybody knew about.
I remember being surprised that Doom, when I first saw it, I thought, oh, that's great, because a lot of us had been playing around with 3D graphics, sort of maze search demos, if you like. It was just the way it took it to a different level.
What John Carmack did was teach the video games industry how to create and structure 3D space.
I think the main innovation was making the software-rendered texture mapping go very fast, but that's probably because I'm from a techie background.
There were so many tropes that were first seen in Doom that it invented the grammar of first-person shooters. I don't think anybody can, point back to earlier stuff and say, no, it was Doom that gave us the first-person shooter, and it was Doom that told us how it all works, how it should work. And then, of course, there was multiplayer. Because Doom had a multiplayer feature, suddenly we're playing against each other.
There were multiplayer games before, you'd play RPGs that were kind of turn-based, but deathmatches were a whole new thing. It was a term that had been around before, but it was totally popularised by Doom.
Doom worked really well on a LAN, and even a LAN was a huge innovation back then. But it just showed that what John was thinking about was pretty ahead of its time.
And this was something that was huge, it wasn't something that was happening in isolation. So another really important thing that Carmack did with Doom was to create this modding community.
What that meant was that other people could get hold of the Doom engine and create their own games, but also lots of people created their own levels for Doom and distributed them online. So it was a really early understanding that the community was part of the development process.
That effectively got thousands of people who are in the game industry now into game development, because they realised that they weren't just watching Aliens, they weren't watching Evil Dead, they were watching something that they could reach into and change for themselves. They could interact with and make a different game.
More recently, one of the things that has been really great that John was a very, very early advocate of was VR technology. And I think so many of us in the industry have found it so exciting, but he was there right at the start, with his support for Oculus and then later becoming Oculus CTO.
Carmack's approach to software development is always around solving problems. He has a passion for solving problems in inventive ways, and he always comes up with the goods. Going from Doom to Quake to Rage and now his work at Oculus, he's looking at graphics in a way that says, what's wrong, what can I make better, and how can I make that accessible for everyone?
He's kind of like the Shakespeare of 3D games graphics.
When he speaks, what he has to say is valuable. What he says is well chosen. There's always this sense of, this is the essence, this is the nub of things.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Bafta Fellowship is awarded to John Carmack. Here you go. Congratulations. Thank you.
So I'm an engineer, and engineering usually involves a lot of fairly mundane things. You want your bridges that don't fall down, your apps that don't crash. And you take pride in your craft, but you don't really expect a whole lot of recognition or even understanding from most people about what it is that you do. But sometimes you have an opportunity to build something that's from the future, and that's where things really do get exciting. I make it a point not to romanticize the good old days because, as we've seen, things are amazing today, and we're not in some fallen state from a better time. But there is something to be said for the early days when you're working on a frontier. When you're doing things that people haven't done before and you don't know what the right answers are, before there's a top 100 list for a genre. The early days were, of course, very hard on the design side of things, when I could say, I can give you blocks and cardboard cutouts. Can we figure out something that's still really great to do with this? But with each hard-fought technical advancement, more and more doors opened and the design space broadened, until we get to today, where a strong team can take any crazy vision and turn it into a reality. Now, this is, of course, a wonderful thing for designers and for the people that play the games. But I do hear sometimes from programmers that are kind of sad that they don't have the opportunity to write game engines from scratch like I did and have it matter and have it make an impact. And here's where some perspective really helps. I can remember when I was a teenager, I thought I had missed the golden age of 8-bit Apple II gaming, that I was never going to be Richard Garriott. And time went by, and I got to make my own marks in things after that. And in that time, I also see so many other opportunities that have come by. I mean, the 90s PC wave was great. I was happy to be there, and I'm glad I took a swing and knocked one out of the park with that. But since then, we've seen mobile games and web games and free-to-play games, the Steam revolution, and now virtual reality. So all of these are amazing. So yeah, the opportunities that I had aren't there for people today, but there are new and better ones. And personally, I'm more excited about these than anything that's come before. So thank you very much for this honor, but I'm just getting started.